Ghana for You TV.
Ghana for You TV.
MPP mpanyimfo akoshem edi nkomobi ano mother His Excellency John Dramani Mahama said the person de ya chama Wontumi bia onye no na de Ghana for interest ewom no eye the policies are about 2024 enya chama Wontumi enti cha chama Wontumi de 20 years na no person mujeli na enya sembia enya news omonfa ne nko na Ghana for hwe ni mu se koko na yetete so no ene ensase a ye galamse wo so a wo se obehye amietu galamse no ase free SHS o se aje okokobo bisia ansa no eti bia ba kam asem eno ena Ghana for hwe ni mu so wode eniama betoto na akwamu no wahwe no waka eho asem na enya chama Wontumi ayache no ase galamse de se eye normal se wo betu galamse enti 20 years de enya hwe wo mu ni ho nkomo amon ka ho hwe do beso de ni bia onfanya na busa campaign yankwate ankoma MPP mpanyifo edi ni bia ba Nebedi nkuma marefi say Ghana for You TV. And na me share, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share the video no enkwatwe. Yente nkuma koso ni bi emba.
Filling stations that they say are operating 24 hours, it's laughable. You all know that filling stations were operating in this country before the NDC came to power. So to claim that about 300 or so filling stations are operating 24 hours as evidence of a functioning 24-hour economy program, and 160,000 jobs announced out of it is laughable. A memorandum of understanding is not a pay slip. In cocoa, a producer price of 41,000 cedis per ton was announced in February, yet farmers reportedly remained unpaid even as at March, despite a pledged $337 million disbursement. So they announced one thing, but the reality on the ground is another. Let's also talk about the unfinished business the government inherited and has still not dealt with. When the previous administration left office, approximately 98% of all debt eligible for restructuring had been negotiated. The domestic debt exchange restructured $20 billion equivalent and delivered debt service savings. The Eurobond restructuring is what delivered the stock reduction, over $5 billion. Yet, nearly 2 years on, the remaining 2%, just 2%, somebody did 98%, you are left with 2% to do. 2 years on, that 2%, about $2.7 billion, is still unresolved under this government. And where are the promised independent fiscal council, the debt management office, and other institutions? Have they been abandoned or delayed or quietly shelved? Or the new fiscal council, we saw an announcement that the new fiscal council has been put in place. Have they been cowed into silence already, as other critical voices are being cowed into silence by this administration? The fourth issue is that borrowing has already begun. Just 9 weeks after the IMF ECF ended, and even before the IMF board considers the last ECF review, the executive is in parliament asking for nearly $1 billion. The minority will scrutinize every PESWA, purpose, terms, and collateral, and where each CD will actually go. Finally, we think that Thursday's presentation must disclose a few things with numbers and not just assurances. First, the actual half-year execution line by line against allotment, and we'll be asking, did the first quarter pattern persist or did it reverse? Second, a full decomposition of the primary surplus, structural revenue, gold windfall, expenditure compression, valuation effects, and one-offs. Third, one reconciled debt to GDP figure and the methodology they are using for it. Fourth, a current audited arrears stock with a credible payment schedule tied to actual allocations. Number 5, verified payroll employment for the Big Push and the 24-hour economy program, and project-level Big Push procurement disclosure. Number 6, the true loss figure and the resolution plan for the Bank of Ghana. Remember, as we've mentioned, the minister has not presented it to Parliament. A team of NDC persons came to Parliament to do a press conference and understated it at 15 billion when it's actually 34, and if you take away the one-off gold sales, it's about 44. So the true figure must now be published. 7th, sensitivity analysis on gold prices, fuel costs, and the cedi. And number 8, the status of the Fiscal Council and the Independent Debt Management Office that was promised, as well as a refinancing plan for the growth agenda that names its sources. And here, let me make this point. The minister has already started sounding the market that he's going to announce some new strategies tomorrow. Mr. Minister, there's a mid-year review to assess performance. Policies have already been announced and funded. Any new policy will just be more settings, props, and audio announcements because they are unfunded. Already, you are struggling to fund the announced policies and promises. Desist from the temptation to announce new cities, new policies, and new projects. Ladies and gentlemen, a country cannot build growth on unspent budgets, unpaid contractors, disputed debt numbers, and jobs that exist only on paper. On Thursday, the MPP, through its minority in parliament, will be in the chamber, measuring the minister's statement line by line against this government's own published data. The Ghanaians deserve numbers and not narratives. We thank you, and we will take your questions at this point. Okay. Me try na me mo na tofa kakra wo twi mo. Enuanom ayeda mo asese anope mo beka yensa wa ha sei. Me gina MPP Policy Coordination Committee na nemu na medinchi akese ebramo. And then any policy committee on finance and economy na ehia wa ha sei. Na watwe ne bosumi ahodo da enim ne be hihia. Na nyuma ahodo a policy committees na fi ase ye ne ye de bi ato abonten. Na ehia ya Ghana sikasem ho the aboni be data no kra wo mu a Bank of Ghana publish bi o finance ministry publish bi o World Bank IMF publish no eno na yempani fo na do mo suko a de aye hunu ye de beto abonten ansa na ochina finance minister aba be kan ni mid-year review edikan ne yehu se omo de intricacies bebre na omo de announce numbers bi e ma ne ye nkofo de se Ghana economy no asesanso wa woni mu abrabom sika na wo se ba aban akache na omo de abo yakohuma no se sika no aban sisi ye no ne nsanka enu nti no ene ma hodo wo se aban etua kama ye no ontumi ntua nti no wo kohwe nkrata mu wo se o the friend primary balance ana oman ni sikeda ho no ho aye fefefe so no kra ne se ontua ne ma bebre wo se otua contractor fo ahodo a ontua ene ma hodo de ne nsaka ono aka so be ya ontua no ni na eda yanim etoso mienu ontua sa ne ma we san se ni sika mbanti no se se we fi ase e bobesia akese no a wo hwe Bank of Ghana data na yeka edikan page over 40 billion Ghana cedis eno da chenkra no ankra signed by parliament say yensa ma no $1 billion almost $1 billion boso min kunu peni IMF eja ne ho no se ade na fi ase ejigu a wa start bobesia be $1 billion na de twato a yeka ho asem ne se we nyina nkangu nchen no ne bosha ahodo o ka se obedi so no oni so a 24-hour economy o ka se obehwe no aye no mfia be mienu ni after sika ye de amani nyina no Wontumi hu NDC chairman ba ko ale bapo enye adwuma 24-hour economy no emu ana NDC women's organizer ne baba akopo enye adwuma e 24-hour economy no emu nso aban ya mani sika 650 billion mfia mienu ye dikan ya total appropriation ohwe free SHS a nana akufo Dr. Baumia dija na nana akufo Dr. Baumia anko bobisia afenye free SHS enro abegina parliament o hia besia $300 million e de akwa free SHS eho adwuma ne niam ahodo disi na nisu so obeye nkokon kitenkito no aba bagie atum se nkofo okum nkokon ye den ewe niam ahodo bebre o ka so obeye no ontumi nye nti de ayesre finance minister ne se ochina obegina parliament a enya afi na oba beto anansesem a kire ye data na Bank of Ghana and finance ministry IMF and World Bank are publishing no eno no nka mo no kure nya ho no obeye announcement foforo isan say policies ne de wedi kan announce ne mum akohomasika na onya ntua nya afi na obeye announce policy foforo ba ko na o announce ye na onya ho sika entua no on kire ye kwan obenya ho sika etua manosi sa medamase. Colleagues, so we'll take your questions and depending on which of our subcommittees at the finance level these questions are directed to, I'll deal with some. I'll invite some of my other colleagues to also deal with some. Yeah, so we'll take a few.
3 at a time.
If you don't have questions, we can end it here.
Sure. So 3 at a time.
Questions? Yes, sir. City.
Senior, on gold board, what does it mean really for the Bank of Ghana to say that it is not going to fund it? And again, we've heard from government that the gold board essentially, with all the costs that it has incurred, is essential for the sort of stability that the economy has experienced and for which government is seeking to push for growth.
So I would give a preliminary response. I'll invite any of my colleagues who feel moved by the spirit to join me. Well, first of all, if the Bank of Ghana says it will no longer fund gold board's gold purchase program, the question is why? The answer is that they have made significant losses on it. In September, when we sounded the alarm, the loss was around $214 million. And we asked for a probe, and you recall that they blocked the probe in Parliament. By the end of the year, it had risen to about $900 million. I'm sure you know what $900 million can do. How many Agenda 111 hospitals it can complete so that nursing students can be recruited, doctors can be recruited, lives can be saved. How many contractors could have been paid so that they will continue with stalled projects in different parts of the country. $900 million is a lot of money. But because they refused and they pretended it wasn't happening, that's where the loss went to. Between January and June, they were still continuing. We are still computing what even that extra loss is. We'll give you that figure as we go along. But now the Bank of Ghana is confirming that what we said was true. And so they will no longer bear this loss. The government and the gold board will need to tell us how they are going to finance this loss, because the structure they are running, if you buy gold at a premium price and sell at the world market price, you will make losses. So who is going to bear that loss? Is it the gold board or is it the finance ministry? They have to tell us where that loss will go. And what we have to do is to ask what the opportunity cost of that loss is, what else that money could have been used for. Millions of young Ghanaians who are looking for jobs, if this money could not have been put into some initiatives which would have given them jobs. So we are waiting for them to tell us where they will move that loss to. But when the governor appeared in Parliament a few days ago and they blocked the media from covering, one of his written answers explained that what is really anchoring the cedi is not the gold board. It is the domestic gold purchase program. So even that narrative that they tell you, that, this government likes a lot of settings and PR narrative. That narrative they tell you that is the gold board. The governor's answer shows clearly that that is not true. And this is why they don't want you to hear from the governor himself. Colleagues, I don't know if anybody wants to add something to Dr. Amin.
Well, thank you, Chairman. You put it rightly. But we have to put this stability in context. When they say because of gold board's rule, they have brought stability, and therefore Ghanaians should accept the cost of that stability. You can achieve stability without incurring the kind of losses that we saw under gold board and the Bank of Ghana. And I'll give you some examples. The inflation that we are talking so much about, by the end of 2022, the inflation rate was 54%, if you recall. 54%. And we all understood the circumstances. The war was a factor because it challenged global logistics movement, imported inflation, and many other reasons. 54%. By the end of 2024, it had come down to 23%. That is a decline by 31 percentage points. They have brought it to today, about 5%. So if a government that brought inflation from 54% to 23%, 31 percentage point decline, can a government that brought it from 23% to 5% say it did better? Can that government say that it did better? One government brought it from 54% to 23%, a decline by 31 percentage points. And the other brought it to now 5% from the 23%. That's about 18% or so. 18 percentage points. But we did it without incurring the losses that we are incurring today. So you cannot tell me that Ghanaians should accept the losses because it brought stability. Another government brought down the inflation by more than what you did without incurring those losses. So that cannot be, accepted. I also talk about the depreciation itself, depreciation of the cedi. By the end of 2022, the cedi was depreciating at 52%. You remember when we said that Ghana had lost the international capital market? The cedi was depreciating by 52%. By the time we left government in 2024, by the end of 2024, the cedi was depreciating by between 18% to 20%. So the government that brought the depreciation of the cedi from 52% to about 18-20% did not incur such losses. How can they then come and say that because of the losses incurred by the Bank of Ghana, we now have the stability? But another government achieved, greater stability without incurring those losses. We talk about reserves. Today they are talking about $13 billion. Before we left government, we had built the reserves through the Bank of Ghana to the tune of $9 billion. We handed over $9 billion in international reserves to them. We didn't incur those losses. So when you talk about stability and therefore the huge cost of $900 million is justified because of that stability, I don't think Ghanaians, will just accept this. They must give us proper explanation. And I tell you, is it that they don't want the stability again if the Bank of Ghana is now announcing that they will cease the pre-financing of gold purchases? They don't want the stability again. They still want the stability. So why will they stop the financing of gold bond? Already inflation has inched up from 3.4% to 5.3%. We are losing it. The cedi, which was appreciating in 2025, remember they said the cedi appreciated by about 40%. From the beginning of 2026 to date, the cedi has depreciated by about 8%. Depreciated by 8%. It's no longer appreciating the appreciation we saw in 2025. Today, it is depreciated by 8%. And if you go to the market, by more than 10%. Don't they want the stability again? So why are they stopping the financing of the gold bond purchases? And so let's don't take this explanation, which I think is below the belt.
Dr. Amin, thank you. We'll take another round of questions. By the way, when Dr. Amin talked of reserves, the Bank of Ghana data shows that in the last about 2 to 3 months, our reserves have lost about $1.2 billion. The minister needs to explain to us where those reserves have gone. Have they used it for market intervention, i.e. pumping on the market, which they have now coined a new phrase for, which they call market intermediation, or what? Where is the $1.2 billion of our reserves going to? Colleagues, I'll take a final batch of questions, if there are any. Final batch of questions, if there are any.
I think besides free SHS, MVP are buying area for 8 years. I always naturally MVP are buying fast and year free SHS. And like MVP are buying free up and she said, and MVP are buying year for free SHS. And NDC are buying about $300 million a year free SHS.
May I say, MPP are buying senior money, Obabemu January 7th, 2017. September 9 of years here, any free SHS. Now, MPP are buying the Okran and say free SHS are there. Here's or minor Ankasa money and here some into your minor din sika or sending them a dika and penny for say here and Sunday a fata. To your minus is in here. I also ya free SHS Dimwa Kotine also do minus sika. And Tim Fiam what tria yet na bemono. Yanko Bob Bissia say it is half Bissian and a free SHS. Yet the Ghana Sika annual budget funding amount fee mineral resources nimu na yeditua free SHS oka. Fofi Antoata NDC oka say first of all double track until we hear omo party chairman announced say double track say within a year wɔn bɛtumi ayi afiri hɔ Kofi Antoata and then this aban say ohia bɛ $300 million bɛsia fi World Bank ansana ne bɔhyɛ a ɔhyɛ free SHS ho no watumi adi so sɛ kosa bi wɔ hɔ a yɛbɛbisa ɔmo na ɛwɔ sɛ yɛbisa ɔmo sɛ ne ba ne sɛn ɛna ade a mo se mo nyade a mo bɛkyɛ ho kora bɛyɛ afe mo wɔ akwaniasan bɛtumi afa so na moatumi asolve de a mo susu sɛ ɛyɛ problem wɔ ho no ba ne sɛn ne ne deɛ baeɛ a mo ba bɛgye bɛsia $300 million for free SHS ɛno kyerɛ wo sɛ ndisi aban no ɔmo te opposition na ɔmo petumi a deɛ ɔmo bɛka biara ne deɛ ɔmo bɛka ɔmo ba abɛn mu a na ato ɔmo atase ebi na sabri ato ɔmo ɛno ɔmo ba parliament no keka si ani a na wɔtwe bɛyɛ nkono pɛ after IMF ECF ne NDA no ɔmo aba parliament sɛ yɛmma ɔmo sika okeka bɔ mu a ɛkeka kɔ bɛyɛ $1 billion IMF board no krampo en review last ECF no enwie yɛ na ɔmo afi aseɛ ɛbɔ bosia foforɔ nti omom jejereje pamcho say question for bi o ha ye be take answer na
Let me highlight something.
Sure.
Madam Journalist. So you also recall that last week or so, the government announced that they have reached the final stage of the debt restructuring, and that the debt restructuring was coming to an end. A lot of you media houses carried that story. But what you didn't do was to ask for the details. Before the MPP government left, as the Honorable Kojo Opong Nkrumah said, we had concluded 98% of the debt restructuring. The remaining 2% amounted to $2.8 billion. That is what was left for them to also do. But what have they done? I know that they've reached an agreement with Afrexim about $700 million. The Sederia exchange of notes, the one they said they have reached the final stage, it's just about $117 million. So if you have million with the Sederia, what is left? You still have about $2 billion of debts yet to be restructured. Now, this government says they are good, they are efficient. A government that did 98%, you say they are bad, and the 2% left for you to do, 2 years, almost 2 years now, they haven't been able to do it. And so, media people, when they publish something, when they announce something, let's interrogate it. But everybody was carrying. Government has come to the end of the debt restructuring. They have reached the final stage with the exchange of notes between government and Sedera. That is not the final stage. There is still about $2 billion that they have not been able to negotiate. And that's the difference between the MPP government and the NDC government. We deliver. They do propaganda. Because why would you announce you have come to the end when you know that you still have $2 billion of the eligible debt to be restructured? The last point I would like to mention is that the energy sector, if you recall, in the 2026 budget statement, the Minister for Finance announced that they had spent $1.47 billion to clear the energy sector debt. Again, most of you media houses, you carry the government clears energy sector debt. When you say clear energy sector debt, it means that you have repaid all debts outstanding in the energy sector. But that was the word used. Again, you didn't interrogate them. What do you mean by cleared? But you all carried it. That's the propaganda. Indeed, the World Bank has projected that by the end of this year, 2026, the debt in the energy sector will reach $9 billion. $9 billion. If the reforms, the energy sector reforms, the government is supposed to implement have not been implemented. What does that mean? The same World Bank 2 weeks ago gave a damning verdict on this government's implementation of the same energy sector reforms. You published it. The World Bank said that the implementation of the energy sector recovery program was unsatisfactory. Unsatisfactory. That is the word used by the World Bank on this government's implementation of the energy sector reforms. And by their failure to implement the energy sector reforms, debts are accumulating. As I speak to you, fuel debts that have accumulated is quite huge. So what debts have they cleared? Why would the debts end at $9 billion United States dollars by the end of 2026? And so the minister should use the review budget tomorrow to tell the Ghanaian public why they failed to implement the energy sector reforms and what measures they are going to put in place. They call themselves reset government, to reset the implementation of the reforms and bring these reforms on track so that we avoid doomsday. Otherwise, the doomsday we all don't like and we pray against, this government is going to bring it back, because the debts that have accumulated will compel them to give up the proper management of the energy sector. And so these are some of the questions we want them to answer. If under an IMF program you have failed to implement the energy sector reforms, then what will happen now that we are not under an IMF program? And this is why I say sometimes that the IMF went to sleep. When this new government came into government, the IMF went to sleep, because they have failed to hold this government accountable to the policies and reforms that they are supposed to be implementing. And this is why they have opted for the PCI to continue to be under IMF surveillance and supervision, because they haven't implemented the reforms they're supposed to implement. And so thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. Thank you very much. You are not done with the questions. I think we are done. One question for Honorable Amin. Please, we are fine. We are fine. We are done. Thank you, friends from the media, for coming. We are going to get you a very...
And you know, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, we MPP for Ekasa, Honorable Kojo upon Kroma, and we dear Nimua, or Chile, some more, what they Ghana for Yakumaswadi, to His Excellency and him. And none of Dr. Mahmoud Baumia, or say Ghana for say, what do Amuka be Sakano, and Yeshenu, so by betray, and your chama won't me actually 20 years dear, Sababes and never before Shenu say, Wabe Fatama won't me a call. Bet me at our Jane. Our comment section Edama me haguswa Ghana for you TV and an anime share make subscribe like comment and share na video na encourage but also share one sem from Ghana for you TV
yan kanta egumi so asew empanyimfo so ne wafuru biapa ne piano na ne opa bibia kokotoko ne na bro o konfo e ho na me scan Twitter ye na me kire wo mo ma hira wo ayo kase pia